Hey everyone, and welcome. So think about it. We are absolutely surrounded by digital files every single day. But have you ever stopped to wonder what they are? Like, really? Today, we're going to peel back all the layers and get right down to their core building blocks. It's this amazing journey from what seems super complex to something that's, well, surprisingly simple. I mean, have you really ever thought about it? When you click open a photo or a PDF or you play your favorite song, what is actually happening under the hood? It totally feels like magic, right? But what we're about to find out is that it's all built on just one, incredibly simple idea. So here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle what is digital data. Then we'll get into the incredible power of a single bit. From there, we'll see how we build numbers and then words. After that, we'll talk about how we measure this digital world of ours, and finally, we'll get into the art of compression. It's going to be great. All right, let's dive right in. Section 1. What is digital data? This is it, folks. The absolute foundation of everything you see on your screen right now. So, what even is data? When you boil it all down, it's really just symbols that represent something else. People, events, things, ideas. Think about it. It could be the letters that spell out your name in an email, the numbers in a budget spreadsheet, or even all the specific little dots of color that come together to create a photo. And that whole process, that kind of magic trick that takes information from the real world, a sound wave from a song, the text in a book, and converts it into a language that a computer can actually understand, well, that process has a name. It's called digitization. And this is the absolute crucial first step. Nothing becomes digital without it. Okay, moving on to section 2, the power of a bit. Now we're really getting down to it. The absolute, fundamental, atomic unit of all information. So, you ready for the big secret? Here it is. Everything, and I mean everything digital, no matter how complicated it seems, a 4K movie, a super high-res photo, a massive video game world, it is all ultimately just a super, super long string of two little symbols, zeros and ones. That's it. And each one of those individual zeros or ones, that's what we call a bit, which is just short for binary digit. The easiest way to think about a bit is like a simple light switch. It can only be in one of two states, right? It's either off, which we call a 0, or it's on, which we call a 1. That's literally it. The entire digital universe is built from that simple, tiny switch. All right, on to section 3, building numbers with binary. So you might be thinking, okay, a bunch of on and off switches, great. How is that useful? Well, the very first, most basic thing we can do with them is count. Now, to get this, it really helps to start with what we use every day. We use a system with 10 digits, right? 0 through 9. That's called the decimal system, or base 10. Computers, they're way simpler. They only have 2 digits to work with, 0 and 1. And that's the binary system, or base 2. And this table here shows exactly how that works. Look, 0 is just 0. 1 is just 1. But then, what happens when we need to represent the number 2? We've run out of digits. So we do the same thing we do in our system when we hit 9. We carry the 1. So 2 becomes 1, 0. 3 becomes 1, 1. And then for 4, we have to carry again, so it becomes 1, 0, 0. And it just keeps going from there. Okay, so that makes sense for numbers. But what about words? I mean, how on earth does a system that only gets on and off represent the letter A, or your name, or a whole book? See, here's the fundamental problem. Your computer has zero clue what the letter A is. To a computer, it's just a shape. It doesn't understand a question mark, or a comma, or any other symbol we use. The only thing a computer gets are those numbers we just talked about, those strings of zeros and ones. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we translate from a number into a letter? Well, here's the big aha moment. We, the humans, just decided to agree on a system. A code, really. We created standards where every single character gets assigned its own unique number. One of the very first was called ASCII. And in the ASCII system, we all just agreed that the number 65, which is 100,001 in binary, would stand for an uppercase A. It's basically a secret decoder ring for text. Now, ASCII was awesome for English, but the world is a big place, right? So the standards had to evolve. We got extended ASCII, which added more characters, but the real game changer is Unicode. Unicode is this huge universal standard that has codes for characters from over 150 languages, all sorts of symbols, and yep, This is exactly why you can send a pizza emoji or a smiley face to anyone on the planet, and they'll see the same thing. Okay, so now we're building files with all these bits and characters. And pretty quickly, these files start to get really big. So that brings us to section 5, measuring our digital world. We need a way to talk about how big they are, and that's where all those terms you hear all the time, like megabytes and gigabits, come from. Now, I want to clear something up that trips up a ton of people, the difference between a bit and a byte. Okay, so a bit with a lowercase b is that single 0 or 1 we've been talking about. We use bits to measure data speed, like how fast your internet is. But a byte with a capital B is a group of 8 bits, and that's what we use to measure file size and storage space. This is the exact reason your internet provider sells you a speed in megabits per second, but when you download a file, its size is shown in megabytes. And believe me, the scale of these things grows super fast. A kilobyte? That's about 1,000 bytes. Think of a really short email. A megabyte is about 1,000 of those, so maybe an MP3 of a song. Then a gigabyte is 1,000 megabytes. Now we're talking about a full HD movie. Every single step up is a huge jump in the amount of information. And that leads us perfectly into our final section, number 6, the art of compression. Because with these files getting bigger and bigger, sending them over the internet or just storing them on your hard drive becomes a real problem. So, naturally, we had to invent some clever tricks to shrink them down. And that's where compression comes in. I'm sure you've done this before. You zip up a folder of files to email it. At its core, data compression is just a smart technique for recoding the information in a file so it takes up less space, so it uses fewer bits. Then, when you or someone else needs the file, you just unzip it and it's all back to normal. And there are really 2 main flavors of this. First, there's lossless compression. This is like perfectly packing a suitcase. Everything you put in comes out exactly as it was. It's perfect for things like documents or program files, where you can't afford to lose a single bit of data. But then there's lossy compression. This is the secret sauce behind streaming music and video. To make those files way smaller, it very cleverly throws out tiny bits of information that our eyes and ears probably wouldn't have noticed anyway. It's not perfect, but it's good enough and it makes streaming possible. And that right there brings our whole journey full circle. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. We started with a single on-off switch, a bit. We grouped them into bytes to make numbers. We assigned those numbers to letters to make words. We learned how to measure them by the millions and billions. And then we figured out how to shrink them down with compression. Every single digital thing you interact with, no matter how complex it seems, is just an incredibly elegant and long pattern of zeros and ones. So I want to leave you with this one final question to chew on. If this simple 2-symbol system, just zeros and ones, is powerful enough to capture almost our entire world of information, everything from art and music to complex science and global communication, what can't it represent? What are the limits? Is there anything that can't be broken down into a pattern of zeros and ones? Just something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.